The office had been buzzing with rumors about a promotion that had just opened up. It was the kind of news that had everyone on edge, wondering who would get the position. After all, it wasn't just any promotion. It was a jump to a management role, something that came with a salary boost and a new level of respect. And I wanted it more than anything. I have been working at the company for years, putting in the extra hours, taking on additional responsibilities, and building strong relationships with colleagues. But there was always a sense that I wasn't quite on the radar of those who mattered. My boss, Mr. Carter, was a young, ambitious man who had worked his way up quickly. At 30 years old, he was already head of the department, and everyone knew he had the power to decide who would fill the vacant management spot. Mr. Carter was charming, confident, and had a way of making everyone feel like they were special when he talked to them, but there was something else about him. Something a little off. It was hard to describe, but I had noticed it in the way he sometimes looked at me, the way he lingered too long in our conversations, and the comments he made about my work. That always seemed to have a double meaning. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, I was focused on doing my job well. But when the promotion was announced, everything changed. Mr. Carter started paying more attention to me, complimenting me on things that had nothing to do with work. It made me uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. He was my boss after all, and I couldn't afford to make things awkward, not when I was so close to getting the promotion. One Friday evening, after everyone else had left the office, I was still there finishing up a project. Mr. Carter came into my office, leaning casually against the door frame. "You're working late," he said with a smile. That kind of dedication doesn't go unnoticed. I smiled politely, hoping he wouldn't stay too long. But instead of leaving, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. My heart raced. This was unusual. "You know," he began, "I've been thinking about this promotion. You're one of the top candidates. You know that, right?" I nodded, unsure where this was going. "But there are a few things that could tip the scales in your favor," he added, his voice lowering slightly. I swallowed hard, feeling the tension rise in the room. Something about his tone made me uneasy. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mr. Carter walked around to the front of my desk, leaning against it casually. As he spoke, his eyes locked onto mine, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made my skin crawl. "Sometimes it's not just about performance," he said. "It's about relationships, connections." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I knew what he was implying, but I didn't want to believe it. I had worked too hard to get this far, and the last thing I wanted was to be put in a position where my promotion depended on anything other than my work. Mr. Carter didn't say anything more, but the message was clear. He expected something from me, something that had nothing to do with my skills or dedication. I had to figure out how to handle this situation without jeopardizing my career. The weekend couldn't have come fast enough. As soon as I stepped out of the office that Friday night, my mind raced with all the possible ways I could handle Mr. Carter's not-so-subtle suggestion. I couldn't shake the feeling of being cornered. Should I confront him? Should I ignore it and hope it wouldn't come up again? Or was this something I needed to report to HR? The problem was I had no hard evidence. His words were veiled, and he hadn't said anything outright inappropriate, but I knew what he meant. It was as though he was dangling the promotion in front of me, like a carrot with a hidden string attached. I spent the entire weekend in a state of tension, unable to enjoy even the simplest of things. Every time I thought about work, my stomach would flip, and I kept replaying our conversation in my head. The promotion was everything I had been working for, but I couldn't let myself be manipulated like that. I just couldn't. By Monday morning, I had resolved to keep things strictly professional. I would show Mr. Carter that I was the best person for the promotion, Based on my merits alone, if he continued his inappropriate behavior, I would escalate it. But as soon as I walked into the office that morning, it was clear that he wasn't going to make things easy. He was waiting for me in the hallway, leaning against the wall as if he had been anticipating my arrival. "Good morning," he said with that same casual smile, though his eyes held a different kind of intensity. "Morning," I responded, keeping my tone cool and professional. "I've scheduled a meeting for us later today," he said, just to go over some final things about the promotion. I nodded, my heart sinking. This was it, I could feel it coming. I wanted to avoid that meeting more than anything, but there was no legitimate reason to back out. The day crawled by, every minute dragging like an eternity. I threw myself into my work, hoping to distract myself from the dread gnawing at me. But my mind kept circling back to that meeting. What would he say? How would I respond? I rehearsed different scenarios in my head, preparing for whatever he might throw my way. Finally, the time came. I walked into Mr. Carter's office, determined to stay calm and professional. His office was sleek and modern, with a large window overlooking the city skyline. He sat behind his desk watching me as I took a seat in front of him. He didn't waste any time. "You've done a great job so far," he started, "but there is one last thing I wanted to discuss. Before I finalized the decision for this promotion, I tensed, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "You know," he said, leaning forward slightly, "I really value loyalty. And sometimes loyalty goes beyond just showing up and doing good work. It's about trust. It's about doing what's necessary to maintain certain relationships." There it was again, that same vague, suggestive language. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my face neutral, refusing to let him see how uncomfortable I was. "I'm loyal to this company and to my work," I said firmly. "I've always done what's necessary to ensure the success of our projects." He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was more of a smirk, like he knew he had me in a corner. "That's good," he replied. "But let's be honest, you know what I'm talking about." I stared at him, refusing to give him any ground. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I like you," he said finally, "and I think you do well in this role. But this is a tough industry, and sometimes you have to make choices that aren't just about the work." I felt a chill run down my spine. This was it, he was pushing me to cross a line I didn't want to cross. The power dynamic between us felt suffocating, and I knew I had to tread carefully. I couldn't risk losing everything I had worked for. But I also couldn't let him think he had any kind of control over me. "I appreciate your confidence in me," I said, slowly choosing my words carefully. "But I believe my work speaks for itself. If there's anything else you need me to prove in terms of my abilities, I'm happy to do that." Mr. Carter's eyes darkened slightly, the smirk fading from his face. He wasn't used to being challenged, and I could tell he didn't like it. "We'll see," he said after a long pause. "We'll see." As I left his office, I knew the tension between us had just escalated. The tension between Mr. Carter and me lingered in the air, like a storm cloud after that meeting. Things at work became even more uncomfortable. He was no longer as friendly or casual as before. Instead, he became distant. But his eyes followed me every time I walked past his office or interacted with other colleagues. It was clear that he wasn't happy with my refusal to play into his game, but I didn't regret standing my ground. I focused on my work, keeping my head down and pushing through the discomfort. My colleagues had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. To them, I was just another candidate in the running for the promotion, and I intended to keep it that way. But inside, I was constantly battling the anxiety that I might lose the opportunity, simply because I wasn't willing to compromise my integrity. A few days later, an email from Mr. Carter popped up in my inbox. He had scheduled another meeting. My heart sank as I stared at the screen. I wasn't sure I could handle another round of his veiled suggestions and manipulative tactics, but I knew I had to face it. When I entered his office again, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. His tone was colder this time, more direct. "I've reviewed everything," he said, his eyes narrowing, "and I'm still not convinced. You fully understand the importance of relationships in this company." I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. "I understand perfectly. I've built relationships here through hard work and respect." He leaned forward, his voice lowering to a near whisper. "Then you know what you need to do." I could feel the pressure mounting with every word he spoke. Mr. Carter's eyes were locked on mine, daring me to break under the weight of his manipulation. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. I took a deep breath, studying myself, refusing to let his words unravel me. "Mr. Carter," I said, meeting his gaze, "I've given everything to this company. My work speaks for itself. If that's not enough for the promotion, then perhaps I'm not the right fit." His face hardened, clearly not expecting me to push back. He had relied on his power over me, confident that I'd cave, but I knew in that moment that I wasn't going to sacrifice my principles for this promotion, or for anyone. The silence between us grew heavy, and I wondered if I had just ruined any chance I had at the position. "You're making this difficult for yourself," he finally said, his tone. "I see. I thought you were smarter than this." I didn't flinch. "I'd rather be difficult than compromise my values," I replied, standing my ground. Mr. Carter stood up, walking around the desk to stand just inches from me. His voice lowered to a near growl. "You think you're making some grand moral stand here? Fine, but let me remind you of something. You're not the only one in the running for this job. There are others who understand the value of playing the game." I knew what he was insinuating. He was trying to make me feel replaceable, as if my hard work meant nothing compared to the connections others were willing to make. But instead of feeling threatened, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This was a moment of choice for me, not just in terms of my career, but in how I wanted to carry myself moving forward. "If that's the case," I said, standing up as well, "then I guess I'm not right for the position." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us crackled with tension. I could see the surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to walk away. "Good luck finding someone else," I added, turning on my heel and heading for the door. Just as I reached for the handle, I heard him sigh behind me. "Wait," I paused, but didn't turn around. "You'll get the promotion," he said flatly, "but don't think for a second this means you've won." I left his office feeling both relieved and unsettled. I had gotten the promotion, but it came at a cost. I knew now that navigating power dynamics wasn't just about success. It was about maintaining your dignity, no matter how high the stakes.